did you, how did you meet Porter? Well, I mean,
Well, I met Porter in Alaska actually.
yeah.
Yeah, when he was up there climbing with Gary Bogart,
Oh, with Bokar,
and
yeah.
I'm at the.
Yeah.
I was in. Let's see, was that 76 or 77? Might have been 77. It was at some point, he's done the Cassin Ridge solo
Really?
uh,
Wow.
at one point, and it was sometime after that. And I met him at base camp, or at the landing site on Southeast Fork on the
Hilton.
Hilton.
Yeah.
And that's the first time I met him. And then I met him again in town. He was going to do something in '77. He and Bogart were going to do the North Face on Hunter, and
Wow.
they didn't do it. But so I met him, and I did McKinley at that same summer, and I think I met him on the glacier after they backed off Hunter or something like that. And then he decided that instead of flying out, he's going to walk out. And back in '77, there was a kind of hippie character. There was the radio operator for the airline, for the air taxis in Talkeetna, giving weather reports. He was done with his stint on the Southeast Fork, and so he and Porter actually walked out to Peters Hills or whatever that's called
Yeah.
down there, down the entire Kahiltna Glacier, and I might have met him at AMH again or something like that. But and I sent him photos. Somehow we stayed in touch, so I sent him photos of the Washburn map where I thought would be a great route on the Rooster Comb, which is up in the West Fork of the Ruth, and because it just looked like a possibility, it's sort of, I forget, it's somewhat north facing, maybe northeast. Let's see, yeah, so maybe northeast, and what I did is that winter, '77 to '78, I worked in Fairbanks. And one of the guys I worked with had an airplane, so we flew down around that area, flew into the cathedral spires, and then flew into the Ruth area, and did kind of a big loop, and took aerial photographs.
Did you use any of those Washburn photos?
What's that?
Did you use any Washburn photos?
Well, he had those photos.
Oh,
I didn't have any of those photos, but he actually knew Washburn. He knew Washburn personally, because he also lived on the East Coast, and and then anyway, I sent him some photos and said, hey, this might be a climb that you might be interested in. I'd be interested in that. And then somehow or another, things kind of got together where, okay, well, let's try to do this together,
Yeah.
How'd that go, the climb?
Well, we got about halfway up.
Yeah.
It's, it was like, it's like constantly snowing,
Was he just keep pressing, or was
No, he's
a level-headed guy?
actually, he's pretty much more mellow than you think.
Uh-huh.
Well, I think, I wonder about his psychological persona, whatever you want to call that,
Right.
because, I think that if this guy would have been by himself, he would not have backed off, he would have kept going.
So did he see you as a possible liability, or
No,
not to put
I don't
you in
think
that position?
I didn't get that impression.
But to put you in that position?
But he made a comment. It's like, so I was leading that last pitch before he backed off.
Mhm.
And there's nothing I could get in. It was like verglass on rock, and I was really sort of freaking out
Strung
because
out.
I was out
Yeah.
ways beyond my last point, and I couldn't get anything in. And I yelled down at him. I said, "Hey, you don't look very good up here." And he just immediately,
Verglass looks to be desperate.
well, whatever he perceived me to feel, I don't know. But he said, like, you know what? It's like, I think that's probably as far as you want to go, or something. He basically agreed to what I And maybe it was just because
Well,
if you're the really good guy that
Yeah,
knows how to do everything, and you realize the other guy's not as competent,
Yeah.
you might say, okay, yeah, I think you're right. You know,
Yeah.
that's somewhere in between there is where how I felt. But
You're totally relying on each other.
Right.
I don't know. But then we backed down.
So if there was
been
another porter,
situations where I was like, this is past me, and
And
my history is.
but we climbed like 15 hours a day, and where I realized, as the whole thing sort of happened, is like he took with him per day, that was his ration, 3 Tuckerman bars. And Tuckerman bars are things that he got back east from a special manufacturer that is local and may not even exist anymore. It's super high energy, kind of like, I figured like, why I didn't have Tuckerman bars.
Proteins and sugars.
Yeah, something like that.
Proteins and sugars.
Some on the pemmican end of things or
Yeah.
whatever. And then, I didn't have anything to match it. So I took along like tiger milk bars or whatever the hell it was for me. And I was trying to be lightweight too, but after 15 hours of climbing, you want a meal. You don't want to have just a few
Yeah.
bars.
and
And
you're,
that's where I was, and I think that's where I was totally different than he. This guy could probably push himself, even if he didn't have any food. And if you heard his account on the Cassine, where he's like, anytime he got over 14 or so thousand, he got altitude sickness. So he had to back down, to like 12, 13,000, where he had like his last camp, and then tried again and got sick again, and then he decided, I'm going for it no matter what, no matter how sick. Well, that's like when you do that, and you're in company with another person who can't do that, somebody's going to die.
yeah, they become a burden. So
Yeah, so that's
Or you're both gonna die.
yeah.
Or you think if he was
Somebody's
with
gonna
another
die,
porter
you're
porter number 2,
What's
clone, if he was with a clone of himself, they'd keep
Oh,
going.
then they might be able to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, we looked at that whole route. And
Has
said,
that thing ever been climbed?
Oh yeah, it's been done by
Cassine?
the Rooster
That route?
Cone.
Yeah.
Rooster Cone?
Yeah, it's been done.
What's
yeah,
that?
since
Yeah.
then?
What buttress, or is it the Rooster Cone climb itself?
But the Rooster Cone is a peak. In
Yeah,
the
but
roof,
is it?
but,
But what route was that?
I don't know what they call that. The thing is, this would be. It has a unique feature in that if you look at it from the north,
Yeah.
it's kind of a face, and it has a feature in it that runs most of that face. That's kind of like a dip.
Oh, like
So
a
it's like a.
gully or something?
It's a face with a
Groove?
notch in it.
Like a groove?
Yeah, like a groove. And that's the
Oh.
one we try to follow.
Okay.
And
Oh.
and so that's it's. I think it would have been and it probably is a beautiful route under the right conditions. But what we did is we ended up we backed off on it. Jack Roberts and this other guy Simon, whatever his name is.
Oh, Jack Roberts.
Jack Roberts.
Oh, that's
Right.
ways back.
They flew in right after we flew in, and they ended up being on what is that called there? Huntington North Face. And I don't know if they left after we did, but we were wondering what happened to those guys. And the Huntington North Face doesn't have any features that sound, to me, have an aesthetic look to it. It's like all these
Big
jagged layers of whatever the hell it is, nothing continuous. That's what I like
Kind
about
of manky line.
No obvious.
Like
Yeah,
a manky
right.
line.
They ended up doing that, I mean, maybe just because they had to survive. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Huh.
But Porter and I then, because he talked to Washburn, and he brought some Washburn photos with him, these 8x10s, and that's the first time I've seen a photo of the elevator shaft. Remember that?
Sweeney's
dilemma, or whatever you want to call it, is
Sweeney's epic.
it's an incredible ice climb. I mean,
Yeah.
Porter and I skied
That's a
up
line,
to it,
yeah.
and to about as close as you can get to to the base of it, and this is a feature on Mount Johnson, and it's like this thing that's in a face, and then it goes like this. There's like really
Chimney.
sort of a shaft that runs 2,000 feet,
Wow.
and it's filled. A part of it's, I mean, the backside of it's filled with ice. We thought like, I mean, and it's steep. I mean, it's probably not as steep as like some of the overhanging ice you find in Maldives, but
Sure.
but it's
Man,
continuous, and you look up there and you thought, like, holy shit! I wished I could do that one. You know, and at the
It's
time,
that line, perfect line,
yeah, perfect
aesthetics.
up, you know, to within whatever so many feet of the summit,
Ridge.
and yeah, that of course, and we from there we skied across the Ruth Glacier to Glacier Point,
Mhm.
and he knew from Washburn that Washburn's been there
Yeah.
back in the mid 50s. That's
Oh.
okay.
Here.
You lose that one.
Give me some paper towels.
So anyway,
Those chair handles slope just a little bit.
there you go. Just help yourself and do whatever you need to do.
Just adding a little patina to the wood.
Yeah, it's not the first one. So
Yeah.
so
I'm still filming you, by the way.
yeah, so we went across the Ruth Glacier
Yeah.
to the east side,
Yeah.
to Glacier Point. Just grab as much as you need, and I have more. So to Glacier Point, and Washburn's been there in the mid-50s to disprove that Frederick Cook had actually climbed McKinley. Remember?
Yeah.
Because in that area off Glacier Point, to the east of that, is where the Falls Peak is located.
Okay.
You know? And Porter knew all those details about the Falls Peak and Washburn having been there, and
Yeah, you think about that too. It's like that's back in the day when there was no internet. I mean,
Yeah,
it was
yeah,
all letters
yeah.
and personal talking.
No cell phones, no GPS,
No
What?
cell phones.
no nothing, just topo maps and a compass.
right. And the other thing is like when Washburn was there at Glacier Point, they found the camp of the Parker Brown expedition. They had camped there, and
Oh shit.
yeah, and so what Porter knew from Washburn was that that Washburn had found evidence of the Parker Brown expedition, which included a whole bunch of either camping gear, but for sure a whole bunch of like canned goods that was canned in the 1800s still.
Holy shit.
You know,
Wow,
that they had
yeah.
left there because it was part of their food supply. So
Now this was on the north side, the
no, this is still on the Ruth Glacier
on
side.
the Ruth side.
This is just
Okay.
off the Ruth Glacier.
Okay.
And then Porter also knew that from Washburn, that the pole, remember the idea with the pole of Washburn climbing up the pole to get the exact same picture? Because the snow had melted down from like the early 1900s over the 50 years
Right.
that it had lapsed. So the pole, and Porter knew from Washburn exactly what the type of aluminum somehow, or had dropped off, and he mentioned that there's a number to these different types of alloys that aluminum is made of, and he says if we find that pole, that will probably pay for our trip into this thing because it's worth quite a bit of money. You know?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Well, so the pole's still out there, I'm pretty sure. You know.
Buried. It's
So
very
that was,
deep.
it was pretty
Yeah.
interesting. So there was a few interesting moments that we had in spite of the fact that we didn't climb the climb. But when we skied out of that site after we attempted, that West Fork, everything was fogged in. He couldn't tell where the ground stopped and the ceiling began. I mean, he
Like
couldn't
vertigo? Did you get vertigo
couldn't-
and just like?
well,
"Yeah,
it
we
wasn't
gotta
really
sit
vertical
down."
when you were on the ground. You could see the ground in front of
Okay.
you, but he didn't know
Right.
which direction exactly you wanted to travel. So we're roped up, and we're traveling until everything started getting dark gray. And then we knew there was going to be a wall there, and then we backed off and went the other way until the other side started turning gray. And when we came back, that whole fog had lifted. And if you looked at the tracks, you'd think like some frigging idiot must have been traveling like until he bounced off from one wall and then the next wall and so on.
Like one of those vacuum cleaners, the
Yeah.
robot
So-
vacuum.
Yeah, right. And well, we stopped at the mountain house, you know, the cabin up there that Don
Ruth
Sheldon built.
Mhm.
So we stopped by in there, and guess who was there? Henry Barber and Yvonne Chouinard.
Oh, shit. Are you serious?
I'm not kidding. With two
Oh,
other guys,
man.
from Switzerland. They were also going to try to climb Mount Johnson, and Mount Johnson is a beautiful peak. It has this
Yeah.
really low angle, kind of like a nose feature on it. And after we ran into those guys, after we spent some time there, I don't think we spent the night there, but I ended up skiing with Yvonne on the slopes right behind the mountain house. You know, we did a couple of
Sweet.
ski runs
Yeah.
and then kept on going. It might have been on the way back that we did that, I'm not sure. But anyway, we traveled down to where Mount Johnson is and looked at what I said, the elevator shaft, and then crossed over to was it Glacier Point, which is one of the few green places right along the side of the Ruth Glacier. You know, with moss and stuff, with a tundra growing on it.
Yeah.
And we spent the night there. So anyway, Porter looks at the route. We could see the haul bags that these other guys had left up there on their route, you know.
Mhm.
And, you know, Porter's a guy that's done all kinds of steep stuff. And he says, like, these guys are totally nuts trying to climb this route because at a low angle like this, he asked this question, you know how hard it is to haul a haul bag up on a shallow slope like that? He
Yeah.
says, like, it's absolutely useless, you know.
Yeah.
No wonder they're in the mountain house taking a break, you know. Well, they backed off eventually, just like we did.
Yeah.
And so we try to camp out on this beautiful green spot at Glacier Point. And, you know, in all those places that's just surrounded by ice and rock, that was the one place that had like shitloads of mosquitoes. So we're like in our sleeping bag, but we didn't bring any tents, you know.
Oh my
So-
God.
So here we are like on a green spot and we're getting eaten by mosquitoes,
Yeah.
you know, miles from any other place.
In the middle of
So
ice.
In a
we had
freaking
to back,
refrigerator.
it was bad enough we had to back off.
Oh,
We actually had to get back on the glacier, and there's right in that vicinity, there's a bunch of huge boulders that stick out of the ice. So we ended up on one of those flat boulders spending
Yeah.
the night. And then after that, we went back, you know. So
who'd you fly in with? Was that
who was that? I forget if it was Doc Geating or.
that long ago? Was he flying that far back?
Pretty much, it might have been Hudson, but but you know, Geating, I think, started out flying first for one of those guys, you know,
Yeah.
Hudson's Air Service or something, and then got on his own. I gotta go and take a leak.
All right.
I'm gonna have to go